who's now Justice Koch, to go secure the Capitol. Somebody said that Louis Donaldson had been waiting his whole life for somebody to ask him to secure the Capitol. He went to the Capitol, and the governor's lawyer, former governors, wanted to take his papers out. Governor Blanton got on the phone. Louis got on the phone. Blanton said, "I want my papers." Louis said, "You can't have them." Blanton said, "By whose authority?" Louis said, "By the governor's authority." Governor Blanton said, "I am the governor." And Louis said, "Not anymore." I drove to Jackson. I was having a whole series of thank you things around the state for people. And the weather was bad, so I just jumped in the back of a highway patrol car and went to sleep for 2 hours, drove to Jackson. About 5,000 people there, shook hands, came back, and spent that first night in the governor's mansion. I got back about midnight. Here's sort of the lessons from that. There are an honor roll of lawyers in that episode who were upholding their view of the rule of law. John J. Hooker, collecting 1 million signatures as twice a Democratic nominee for governor. He's a lawyer. Joe Henry, the Chief Justice, was in the hospital with a heart ailment, and I insisted that he come out because I wanted to do everything I could to give the ceremony the appearance that it was a regular ceremony, that wasn't just a usurpation by the only elected Republican in the whole state of Tennessee. Today we're a pretty Republican state, but that way everybody was a Democrat but me, in the state government. Justice Koch, who began the day as an assistant to the Attorney General, who was a part of this, and ended the day as the legal advisor to the new governor. I'd already hired him before then. Hal Hardin, who initiated the whole thing, who was about my age then, had a very promising career in his political party, and who put it all on the line by the phone call he made. Bill Leach, a self-described yellow dog Democrat from Murray County, who changed his opinion on Wednesday and ruled that I could be sworn in earlier and acted to cause it to happen. Lieutenant Governor John Wilder, who was Governor Blanton's state senator. This was not an easy decision for him. A non-lawyer was Ned McWhorter, a really exemplary figure, who the last person you saw. On another occasion, when I became governor, the press said, "What are you going to do with this new young Republican governor?" And he said, "I'm going to help him, because if he succeeds, the state succeeds." A pretty good example for those of you who are thinking of anything in public service. And then there was one other group of lawyers who performed admirably that day, and that were the courts, the judges of Tennessee. I took the position that no pardon or commutation was valid until it was actually delivered. And so I locked the prison doors to some of the prisoners who had been pardoned by Governor Blanton. I wouldn't let them out because I said they hadn't actually had it delivered. I had a number of pretty unhappy murderers on my hands at that time. They, of course, sued, and the lower courts split, and the Court of Criminal Appeals decided in favor of the prisoners, who were probably at that moment some of the most unpopular defendants in the state of Tennessee. So the rule of law worked for them as well. 10 years ago, I was on the faculty of the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and I was teaching a course called The American Government and the American Character. And I invented little facts, and I gave them to the students, because I was trying to show that America is unique, not because of race or ethnicity, but because a few principles unite us as a country. Principles with which we almost all agree. Equal opportunity, for example, the rule of law. But often they conflict, and that's what our politics is about. For example, if I gave you a case study to study and said, this is about whether illegal immigrants ought to have Illinois driver's licenses, list the principles that support your argument. Some of you might say equal opportunity, and some of you might say rule of law. They might conflict. Sometimes you even apply the same principle in different ways. So I gave my students at Harvard in 2002, the year in which Fred Thompson resigned or decided not to run again, and I suddenly decided to run for the Senate. I gave them this case. I gave them exactly these facts. I said, you're a 38-year-old governor, all this happens, you get this phone call, what do you do? Should I have been sworn in? And make a 3-minute statement to the people of your state about your decision and why you did it and why it is supported by the rule of law. About half the students said yes, they would have agreed to be sworn in early, and about half said no. And so my message to you as outstanding students in a great law school, as you look forward to a career, you'll make some of your best friends here. This is a good time to take full advantage of the opportunities you have. But remember, you don't have to go back to Adams and Jefferson and Lincoln and others to find examples of exemplary lawyers practicing in the grand manner, applying the rule of law, maybe in different ways, but in admirable ways. That you can find them in Tennessee not many years ago in the person of a young United States attorney, a yellow dog Democrat attorney general, a chief justice of the state who was in the hospital with a heart attack, a lieutenant governor who was the state senator of a governor who was about to be thrown out of office, and finally in the courts themselves who upheld the rule of law in a way that helped restore the confidence in our system of justice at a time when it was greatly threatened in our Tennessee history. Thank you. Now, who has a question or a comment? It can be about anything. Yes, sir.
Senator, that was a very interesting story. Thank you for telling it. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the basis for the Attorney General's opinion. Apparently there was some reason to think that the legislature could set a date for the inauguration, but apparently something, I'm guessing, in the Tennessee Constitution that said that that wasn't in any way binding. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, I don't remember all of it. Great question, though. I do remember that I believe the Constitution says it needs to be a legislative ceremony. And I suppose one might interpret that to be one set by the legislature, and they had acted to set it for Saturday. So that was one question. Is it a legislative ceremony if the legislature itself hadn't acted? Then I think there was a question of interpretation of date, whether it had to be before a certain date or not. I think those were the two issues. I was doing my best to respect the legislature, being a young Republican governor in a state dominated by Democrats. You probably saw recently that it looked like President Obama and Speaker Boehner got into a tiff over the president said he was going to come over and make a speech, and the speaker said no, come Thursday instead of Wednesday, and everybody thought the speaker was being rude. Well, in my humble view, that was amateur hour at the White House. I mean, if I'd done that to McWhorter and Wilder, I would never, ever seen them again. I mean, a legislative ceremony is the entire prerogative of the legislature. I mean, courtesy to the president or courtesy to the governor is certainly one thing, but I would never say, I will be sworn in as governor on Saturday at noon. I would confer with Wilder and McWhorter, the speaker, and I would ask for it, and then either they would announce it or we would jointly announce it as a matter of comedy. So those were the two issues. It might be worth examination by University of Memphis law students. And it's an opinion that was released on January 15, 1979, and the Assistant Attorney General was Trip Hunt. And he said that I could be sworn in early, but I know from Justice Koch that the Attorney General himself was upset with the opinion because he thought it was wrong. And it was Wednesday before he changed his mind about that. Good constitutional law case. Yes?
So when you resigned your position as Congress chairman in the Senate last week, you said that you wanted to try to build consensus in the chamber.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any elaboration on that. I was just curious of what your plans are to try to move the Senate forward.
Well, thanks for the question. My leadership in the Senate is not like being governor. I mean, a legislature is more of a reactive body. So it's the governor or the president who said, let's go this way. Here's the strategy. I'm going to try to persuade you I'm right. And then we all mill around, and don't like it and complain, and we come to a result. Well, if the president doesn't do that, then we don't know what to do. It's like milling around like cattle out in the field or something without any sort of direction. So what a legislative leader does is really reflect the consensus in his caucus more than lead. Now you say, well, he should lead, but the Senate operates by unanimous consent. That is to say, one senator is in a bad mood. We can't even have the opening prayer until he agrees. So I've been part of the leadership for 4 years. I've enjoyed it. It's given me a seat at the table. I can make my advocacy at the table. But if you're in the huddle and the quarterback says we're going to sweep left end and you really want to go around right end, so you go out and I go around right end, everybody else is going around left end, that's not a very good place for me to be. So what I've decided is that I can do more in a body where it usually takes 60 votes out of 100 to get a result. As an independent senator, I'm still a very good Republican. I vote with Republicans most of the time, but they're good Democrats and good Republicans who in the end are going to have to agree on something if we're going to reduce the debt, find a place for putting used nuclear fuel, fix No Child Left Behind, a lot of other things we need to do. So maybe because of my governor training, I'm more interested in oriented toward results. I think our country's in some trouble right now, and I think we need more senators who are willing to do that, and I think there are a number who are. Yes?
Speaking of debt, the Debt Reduction Committee, the bipartisan committee, what was your opinion on what their role is and what they're supposed to do?
Well, what I hope they do is think big, try to get another $3 trillion in reduction, and I hope they focus on entitlement spending, mandatory spending. I think it's a good idea. It's a way to get a result. Nobody much liked the debt reduction plan in early August. I thought it was a pretty good deal, and here's why. Because it took 40% of the budget, which is national parks, national defense, college scholarships, and put it on a path where over the next 10 years it goes up 1%, about the rate of inflation. You could argue that's under control. The other part of the budget, 55%, which has Medicare, Medicaid, mandatory, all these so-called mandatory spending, is going up at 3 times the rate of inflation, and nobody has enough money to pay for that. So this is a time when the Democratic president and the Republican House ought to be able to agree on some ways to, over the long term, save Social Security, save Medicare. You don't have to make big changes in it. You just have to make sure that 10, 15, 20, 25 years down the road, it's there for you. And that's what we need to be doing, and that's what I hope they focus on in December. And I'm slightly optimistic they'll succeed.
Senator, I think we have time for one more question. We have classes starting at 1 o'clock. So
Yeah, I don't want to mess with class. Yes, sir.
Senator, are you supporting any particular candidate for president in 2012?
Good last. There's some rule you'll learn in advocacy about taking the last question or asking the last question. That's actually a good question to end on. I like the governors. You know, I think President Obama has many admirable qualities and some policies I agree with, but I think what he's not as strong is what I was just describing as executive leadership, the sort of I shall go to Korea leadership that you saw from that the country saw from President Eisenhower, where he just singly focused on the biggest problem and said, I shall work on it until it's done. And everybody thought, well, you know, if he does, he'll probably succeed, and build confidence, and he did. So I like the governors. I like Romney and Perry and Huntsman. I think they even have they all have strengths and weaknesses. They say to me when I say that in the press, well, Perry said some, you know, funny things. But on the other hand, I saw him talk about immigration the other day during the debate, and he stuck to his guns on his opinion on immigration, which is unpopular with the audience. And I think that's what you need in a president, is someone who has a sense of where they want to go. And we can be guided by that. We don't have to agree